Hey, it's Adrienne Lawrence, and welcome in to the Young Turks, the conversation. I am excited to have you here today because there are so many important things we need to talk about, especially one that is very much intertwined in the upcoming midterms. And we're talking about abortion rights. And here to join us is the co-founder and CEO of Vote Pro-Choice. That's Heidi Sieck. Thank you for joining us, Heidi.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Adrienne.
Yes, I'm happy that you're joining us, even though the circumstances are not great. We're all still reeling from the reversal of Roe v. Wade. And I know that VPC, this organization that you founded, and that you are leading toward making meaningful change as it concerns abortion rights. I know that you've really been at the forefront of the fight to elect bold pro-choice down ballot candidates right now in every state. And I'm wondering, with the midterms coming up, with a lot of conversations going on in terms of whether people are going to back the GOP or back the Dems, what are you seeing when it comes to where abortion fits into that conversation?
Well, abortion definitely is a mobilizing issue now. And I really appreciate that we're having this conversation, particularly because we have to be focusing those attention on those state and local races. For these upcoming midterms, we often find that folks are very fixated on Congress, and the fact is there are 108,293 races on the ballot in November, and we have to be paying attention to every single one of them. So we are seeing massive mobilization around the issue, particularly around voter registration. Women are registering to vote at extraordinarily larger numbers than men. And so we are very hopeful that this will give some attention to abortion rights as a voting issue. We are very hopeful about that. And it is key in mobilizing voters now.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad to hear that so many people are now getting in this fight in terms of exercising their right to vote, or at least showing that intent to exercise by signing up and registering for voting. Do we know anything more about the demographics of women? Are we looking at women who are primarily of a certain age or income, demographics, race? Where are these women coming from that are most motivated to get involved in their local elections?
I am so excited you asked that because about a third of those folks that are registering are under the age of 25. These are young people. In Pennsylvania, now 62% of these women are newly registered as Democrats. So it's across the board, certainly, and it's all demographics. But we're really excited about young people, and we know they're pro-choice voters. I mean, we saw it in Kansas. 70% of the newly registered voters after the Dobbs decision were women. And the Kansas ballot initiative, for your viewers, Kansas did strike down a ballot initiative that would have basically codified an abortion ban in the state constitution. They said no. They voted in support of reproductive freedom and reproductive justice, and at an extraordinary high number. And those 70% of those newly registered voters were women, and we're expecting that to happen across the country.
Wow, that is a powerful thing, especially if what we saw in Kansas, essentially having the Kansans successfully really preserve their right to access abortion. If we can see that on a national level, that would be a very powerful thing. But I guess how many other states are potentially in a situation where abortion is somewhat on the ballot, or there's the potential for it in terms of who's elected?
Well, two things I'll say about that. Number one, what I've always said since we created Vote Pro-Choice in March of 2016, and frankly, for my whole career, which started when I was 17 years old. I started working in Planned Parenthood of Lincoln, Nebraska, and then the Nebraska unicameral in the early 90s, when there were these pieces of legislation that were being tested and passed in state legislatures that were going to restrict reproductive freedom. Now, working in political environments in a red state like Nebraska, I can tell you for sure that the population then certainly did not want their lawmakers to decide their healthcare decisions about abortion or basically anything else. And that has always been the case. What we say at Vote Pro-Choice is that we are in fact a pro-choice nation. Over 80% of this country does not want their lawmakers to be involved in their healthcare decisions, particularly their decisions about abortion. And that's what we saw in Kansas. And so we have to remember that We actually are a nation that did not want Roe v. Wade overturned and does not want to be in the situation that we're in. So that has been the case since the beginning. What we're going to see now in this election is California, Michigan, and Vermont do have ballot initiatives that are going to support the right to abortion. Kentucky has a ballot initiative that's going to try to protect human life in their constitution. So Kentucky, for us, is one of the most interesting states. Vote Pro-Choice has done a lot of work there, mobilizing women voters in our particular case from the lens of reproductive freedom. And they did, in fact, elect a Democratic governor who supported healthcare access. So that's going to be a really interesting place to look. But we also need to look at California, Michigan, and Vermont, which are protecting abortion, who I believe those states will prove what we have always been saying. We are a pro-choice nation, and that's what we're hoping to see.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot in the media conversations being had that really do focus on this almost Christian nationalist approach of, taking away any kind of abortion rights, and this really pro-life narrative that's getting so much focus. And it seems that they're missing that there are so many members of the GOP, so many people who identify as Republican who also want to preserve their right to pro-choice. And it's
100%. Yes.
Members of the GOP are either foolishly ignoring this or they're trying to just trample it and ignore it. Do you have any idea or thought why they're taking this approach?
Oh, listen, this is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. First, let's really take a step back. Go back 40, 50 years when Roe v. Wade was overturned. The Republican Party or when Roe v. Wade was decided, the Republican Party actually was pretty pro-choice. They didn't have a strong stance against abortion rights. But say Ronald Reagan wanted to run for president, and he knew, and all of the political strategists at the time knew, that they could not get a Republican president elected without mobilizing a particular voter that prioritized anti-choice, forced birth, whatever you want to call it, in order to win elections. So the GOP made a tactical strategy, a decision in the 80s to throw tons of money in down ballot races, in infrastructure to support protests, in taking over judicial appointments like the Federalist Society, and an extraordinary amount of disinformation and misinformation, particularly electing state legislatures, passing pieces of legislation, school board races, local races, and they did this for decades. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party and the progressive ecosystem focused on federal elections and the Supreme Court and did not answer at all the strategy the GOP was using for decades. They, in fact, abdicated the conversation about abortion to a few women's groups who did as best they could, mobilizing folks and protecting rights. That's Planned Parenthood and NARAL and other feminist organizations, and basically abdicated the issue of abortion and reproductive freedom, not meeting voters where they were at all for decades. So we find ourselves in that position where that overly funded anti-choice minority, which is what I call it, has won. It's like the dog that caught the car in a way. And so a great portion of the GOP, and we know 80% of the country, does not want our reproductive freedom to be taken away as it is. So it's going to be a very curious and complex conversation that the GOP has to have with its electorate, as well as the Democratic Party, embracing abortion rights as a mobilizing issue. And finally, stop calling it a women's issue and have it be what it's always been, an issue of economic justice and freedom. And I'm not really thrilled with how anybody's addressing the issue now. So I am very hopeful that the voters will speak loudly and allow us all as political organizers, political activists, to start really embracing this as an everyone issue.
Absolutely. I think that would be a very powerful way to go. And there's so much really to hang your hat on as far as I'm concerned with, the rising prices of inflation, the fact that people cannot necessarily afford the cost of living So to bring a child into this world, also we're seeing temperatures go up. There's just so much there that would really discourage people from wanting to raise a life or to have a child. So letting people have control over their own destinies would be a very powerful thing. So there's a lot of conversations to be had that I think would resonate with a lot of people. And so hopefully we, the people, will get to the ballot box and cast votes in favor of being able to control our own destinies. And I know that we don't have very much time left, but I know VPC is involved in some very incredible stuff, including with Crooked Media. And so can you quickly tell us where people can go to get involved, where they can find out more, and if you have something great coming up?
Oh, we absolutely do. Vote Pro-Choice is in partnership with Crooked Media to mobilize over 6 million women, potential women voters and to register them to vote over 11 states. We're very excited about this program. And then those voters, once registered, will receive the Vote Pro-Choice National Voter Guide, which is the most comprehensive, expansive, most used voter guide program in the country to help voters go to the polls fully informed and ready to vote through the lens of reproductive justice. We also have a program called Care is Not Criminal, which is focused on those local criminal legal positions like district attorneys, sheriffs, and judges who are going to be on the front lines of the fight to protect reproductive freedom.
Fantastic. That sounds so incredibly exciting. And there's a lot to get involved there. And so where can people go in terms of a website to find more?
We can be found at voteprochoice.us or careisnotcriminal.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Heidi Sieck, co-founder and CEO of Vote Pro-Choice.